Energy Streetfight is a game in which two teams compete against each other to make more islands habitable than the other side. Our prototype was played here in Berlin in summer over the course of 8 weeks. The players are the residents of one street. One street side, all the houses and residents in this street compete against the other street side. They both form teams and compete against each other. The game is played in an island world, an undiscovered island world in which there are many mysteries, treasures, and secret hideouts. This world is inhabited by friendly pirates. Each pirate ship represents one house of the street. Sailing from one island to the next, the pirates quickly discover what each island has to offer. They find islands with plenty resources, others where vital supplies are missing. In order to make these islands their hideouts, make these islands habitable, they need to transport supplies from one island to the other. And once they've done so, once they've brought the right supplies to an island in need, this island falls to their team. In the end, they want to make this whole world more lively, more habitable. What fuels the game is an input from the real world. The residents of the street measure their electricity each week and give us their electricity meter readings. Depending on how much they consume, on how little, or how well they improve week over week, they get more degrees of freedom in the game world. Finally, what these degrees of freedom are being used for is their ships become faster and more agile in the game world. This makes the game easier to play for the team who work together, who share ideas, who share their approaches with each other, and conquer these islands for their team. To sum it up, Energy Streetfight is a playful approach to reduce domestic energy consumption.
Pirates, stories, islands, energy consumption. Sounds like a fun game, tackling a real-world issue in a playful manner. But Energy Streetfight is more than just a game. Energy Streetfight is an experiment. An experiment in achieving a paradigm shift, and an experiment in building better systems. What do we mean? What do we mean by that? And why does it matter? In order to answer that question, I would like to ask all of you to rise. So if you could please get up. You just had a break, which means you should be somewhat loose, okay? But what we want to do now is we want to open you up for what's to come. So if you could please loosen your neck and turn your head towards the person next to you. If you have to give them a friendly nod to acknowledge they're there, please do so. And I'd like you to take a deep breath through the nose and just exhale. We try that again. And again. Now, that's inhaling, exhaling. We'll keep doing that. But what we'll try to do now is we'll try to stretch, put our hands up, our arms up. Deep inhale. Again, deep inhale. Feel free to let your voice out. If you need to break out in shamanic chantes, please do so after the performance. Okay, so let's do it once more. Feel free to sit down again. You should feel your chest open up while you're doing this. I can see some people smiling in the front. I can see some frowns in the front. To be honest, I myself don't know what to make out of this exercise, or all these exercises that are meant to open me up. Because when I engage in these exercises, I start to leave the Cartesian, rational existence that I lead in this very moment, and I move into my bodily reality, and I try to go inside. And as I go inside, my inner voice starts emerging from the depths of my inner space, echoing its way through my whole bodily existence, coming ever closer to my inner ear, moving up to whisper and say, "Man, you live in a sick world." And when I say sick, I don't mean in an appropriate or awkward way, sick. I mean it quite clinically, sick. Sick, infected by a virus. A vicious virus, a potent virus, an omnipresent virus. Anyone's got an idea? I'm talking about the consumption virus. The consumption virus. And the consumption virus is vicious and omnipresent. It's also tricky. Why is it tricky? Because it doesn't affect your respiratory system. I can breathe just fine. It doesn't affect my digestive system. I can digest just fine, more or less, depending on what I eat. Okay? It doesn't affect any of my bodily functions. I'm just fine. The thing it affects, that's what makes it so tricky. The thing it affects is our perspective, the way we look at the world. Yeah? And because it's so tricky to see, it's really tricky to tell who's infected. In fact, I'd suggest that many of us, if not all of us, carry that virus in us. That many of us are, to use the correct economedical term, homo consumensis. Yeah? What are the symptoms of the homo consumensis? The homo consumensis lives his life passively. And by that I don't mean the homo consumensis sits at home and plays Xbox and, watches TV and waits for life to pass by. I'm not talking about the degree of busyness. I'm talking about internal passivity. I'm talking about psychological passivity. I'm talking about the unawareness of our true essence. I'm talking about the unawareness of our true potentials. And this puts us in a logic of taking, of internalizing, rather than giving, externalizing, unfolding. And what that leads to, it leads to the homo consumensis experiencing himself or herself one-dimensionally only. What do I mean by one-dimensionally? Well, it's the only way to relate to the world around us. As someone who doesn't know his potentials, who's in the logic of taking, is the mode that the virus promotes. It's consumption. And I'm not just talking about products or cars or houses. I'm talking about relationships, habitats, people, lifestyles, ego. Yeah. Why is that important? Why is this important? Okay. And how does this virus spread? Yeah, we're talking about the symptoms here. They're important. But the symptoms alone are not the key issue, all right? How does this virus spread? The answer to this question is the virus spreads via culture. Via culture that emerges from the systems which we have built around us, for ourselves, through ourselves, with one another. This type of system I'm talking about is called the business model. The business model is a black box system. A black box system means there are inputs, then there's a black box, there's a transformation process, and then something comes out of it. In the business model, we input resources. Human resources, natural resources, intellectual resources, doesn't really matter, the list is quite long. Yeah? What happens to these raw resources? What happens to these raw materials? They're transformed into something consumable, something that we can eat, something that we can consume. We call it products. But the process doesn't stop there. Contrary to popular belief, products are not the output. Services are not the output of a business model. In fact, in the transformative process, products are consumed. And what comes out of the business model is profit. Profit. Or, to use a more politically correct term these days, economic growth. And it's this economic growth which informs the ethos, the values that underlie our culture, the culture of progress. And it's this culture of progress that carries the consumption virus from one person to the next, from one nation to the next, from one continent to the next, from one hemisphere to the next. So what we find ourselves in is a vicious loop, an epidemic loop. The individual infected by the virus, building systems to occupy himself in this state of mindlessness, creating a culture of progress defined by economic growth that feeds the individual evermore in his delirium. So how can we counter? How can we counter this progress, this culture of progress? And the answer might seem deceivingly simple. Raise your awareness. Raise your awareness to the way we are straining our environment. Raise your awareness to the way we are straining non-human life. Raise your awareness to the way we are straining human life and our societies. Raise your awareness to the way you are straining your very self. Yeah? This is a job for each and every single one of us. It's an individual task. No one can help us with this. The revolution starts in your mind. Yeah? But just as that negative situation of the consumption virus infecting the homo consumensis and so on is reinforced by the systems which we have built in which we live, so we can support our progress, this paradigm shift, systemically, by building better systems.
What kind of systems are we talking about? Systems that promote activity, not passivity. Systems that are centered around the creation of value, in which economic sustainability is only one of the emerging properties. We call these systems value systems. What do value systems look like? How to build them? We have started to learn and grasp the implications ourselves over the last couple of years through our research and through the experiments that we did. One of them is energy Streetfight. Today, I would like to share 3 learnings with you that we came across. First of all, the process. It needs to be experimental. It needs to be open, embrace failure. It needs to improve our knowledge to assumption ratio. We go out, bring our projects to the world, breathe life into our ideas, and when we do so, the experiences we make, we gain knowledge with them. This informs our assumptions, which in turn are the pillars of our worldview. Second, activation. Currently, our models are built on transactional relationships, on models that make us ever more passive and unrelated. Let us build systems that activate individuals, which instigate action. In energy Streetfight, individuals, the residents, needed to come up with new ideas and new approaches to save electricity and new ways of sharing them as widely as possible with their street side. Let's create systems that activate groups which enable interaction. In Energy Streetfight, again, we designed a model in which groups needed to collaborate, neighbors needed to collaborate, to come together and determine their strategy and determine the direction that their pirate ship was sailing towards. One particular form of activation is playfulness. In games, fun, a story, and a frame in which we can experiment and dare all come together beautifully. Third, integrality. If progress equals in many of the models and in many thoughts profit and growth, the maximization of profits and growth, let's move beyond that. Let's look at progress more holistically. And even more importantly, let's build systems which enrich all of the human facets of the experience that we have on this planet. Together with Habib and Vijak, a good friend, and Vijak Haddadi, a good friend and systems philosopher, we've come up with a model that I would like to share with you today, which helps us to look at the creation of value holistically in 4 dimensions. The scientific dimension. How can we improve our daily lives with innovations in technologies and processes? We see this everywhere. Every day we hear about new things that are being invented and that are being brought to us. This is beautiful, but value creation can happen in more dimensions than just this one. The systemic dimension. How do we beneficially transform our social and natural environments? What we ask here is, how do we improve the social systems that we are embedded in? How do we, in a universe, on a planet where one constant is change, how do we transform, how do we preserve our natural environments, the landscapes that nourish us? Transforming them can mean preserving them. The cultural dimension. Here we ask how we create new feelings of belonging, how we can create systems which enable us to become more empathic, to reach out, to bond in new ways, systems which enable new forms of expression. And finally, the psychological dimension. In this dimension, we build systems in this dimension help us to uncover our human potential, to define in new ways subjectivities, which help us to see reality as it really is. These value systems, we have used the value diamond, which we call this structure, in our works as coaches, as lecturers, as entrepreneurs, and have experienced that it opens up spaces in which to think about value creation holistically. Let us thus move beyond the business model. Let us transcend the homo consumensis. Let us build systems which activate us. Systems that take into consideration all the facets, all the aspects of life on this planet. Thank you.